Here we're going to discuss the equine body condition scoring system. This is a very useful system when assessing the relative fat cover over a horse's body. What this information can tell you is it can help a manager make decisions about nutritional changes or exercise changes in that horse's daily regimen. We're going to look at a couple different horses today. We'll start with this Arabian mare, and then we'll finish with a quarter horse gelding. What's so useful about the equine body condition scoring developed by Dr. Henneke is that it can be used on a variety of breeds. It can be used on mares, foals, stallions. It can also be used on horses that are at different states in their reproductive status, such as this pregnant mare. Because the system looks at a variety of spots on the horse in order to determine the one score, you'll be sure to take out any of those breed differences. So this, again, is an Arabian mare who is in foal, and we're going to look at 6 places on her in order to determine her body condition score. We're going to assign her a score from a 1 to a 9. 1 would be a severely emaciated animal, and 9 would be a severely obese animal. In your lesson plan, there's a description providing details on each of those 1 to 9 points. The 6 areas that you're going to look at on a horse start with the crest, or along the top of the neck. This is a great example of where you'd want to move this horse's mane in order to determine what her crest really looks like. I'll give you a hint. This mare is carrying some extra fat cover over her entire body, so that'll help us make some decisions as we continue to look at her. So her crest, you can see here, she started to deposit some fat. It kind of wiggles when you move it. That's already telling me that she has some extra fat cover on her body. Let's continue towards the back and look at some more places. So that's the first place. Next, we're going to look at her withers. You're going to look at how prominent they are. As they start to deposit more fat, again like she has, you're going to have more rounded withers. This is an area where you also see some differences among breeds, so don't get too caught up on what the withers look like and make a determination only at that point. We're going to keep looking. We're going to look behind the horse's shoulder and right behind the elbow here. They'll start to deposit fat there if they're a fairly heavy animal. Right back here, we're going to look at the barrel, or the amount of fat that's covered over the horse's ribs. You want to see the horse, you don't want to see the horse's ribs, but you should be able to feel them. We'll talk more about feeling the horse in just a minute. Next, you're going to look along the back. You want to see how visible the spine is. If a horse that starts to put on a good deal of weight, like this mare has, she's actually got a crease going down her back, and you can see that. And so that just tells us, again, she's on the higher side of that 1 to 9 scale. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The last place that you're going to look is around the tail head, okay? This is a place, this mare's a really good example of it. Once they start to get a good amount of fat on their body, they'll deposit spongy fat here, and she has done that, okay? You'll see, before I've determined a score for her, I have been touching this mare. You will all be able to practice assessing a body condition score for horses, and you'll get an estimate. But in order to get a definite answer, you'll need to feel the animal. I'm not sure if you can tell, but this is winter time in Michigan. So this horse has already started to put on a pretty good thick winter coat. And if we didn't touch her, we might be fooled and think that hair is fat. So that's really important on a thin animal. So you're going to feel the horse and feel for those ribs. I'll tell you right now, for her, it is difficult to feel those ribs. That tells us she's well above a 5 or an ideal range, okay? So judging by all of the areas that we've looked at this mare, all of those 6 spots, I'm probably going to put her at least a 7.5. So she's definitely not ideal, which would be a 4 to a 6. And she's definitely not thin, but I wouldn't consider her obese. So I'm going to go ahead and put her the mid-7s range for her. Next up, we'll look at a horse that has a bit different body condition score. All right, we're back with the second horse. What we're going to do with this quarter horse gelding is we're going to use that same very useful system, look at the 6 different points on him, and try to assign a body condition score to him. All right, come along with me and see if you can remember those 6 points and see what number you think this horse would earn. We're going to start out at the crest or along the top of the neck. Remember, if you're on the mane side, you'd have to move it over. Remember when we looked at that mare and I went like this with her neck? It was quite spongy. It moved back and forth, and this gelding does not do that. So right now I already know that he doesn't have a lot of fat cover over his neck. Okay, we'll move on back to his shoulders, or excuse me, to his withers above his shoulders. This is where you can really see some breed differences. We know this is a stock type horse and that they are likely to have a bit more prominent wither than, say, an Arabian like the mare we just saw. So his withers are a bit sharper. They come to a peak here. Nothing to be alarmed, but certainly not as much fat cover as the last horse. We'll slide down below his elbow. There's no fat cover here, okay? Or no extra fat cover, I should say, right behind his elbow. That's just hair that's hiding my fingertips. This is why it's very important to actually touch the animal before you assign a body condition score if you have the opportunity. We'll slide back to his barrel along his ribs, and this is just the perfect amount of fat cover on his ribs. Certainly because he has this good amount of winter hair, you can't see the outline of his ribs like you would be able to on, say, a body condition score 3. But, so they're covered, there's no faint outline, and it's just a little bit of work for me to be able to feel them. So he's got ideal cover over his ribs. I like that, all right? But not a lot of extra cover, and he's certainly not emaciated. We'll come back. We'll look at the tail head as well at the end, and you can see that he has just the slight amount of fat there, not a lot of spongy fat. And the sixth place that we haven't looked at yet is along his spine, okay? You can see that his spine has much different look to it than did the mare. It does not have a crease along the back, all right? So how I determine body condition score is we can throw out certain scores right away. We certainly know that this horse, from the amount of fat cover that he does have in some areas, that he's not a 3 or below. Because of some of the more prominent areas, you can see overall his body, if you step back and look at it, he's a little bit more angular, which would tell me that he has less fat cover than the really round bay mare that we just looked at. So he's not going to be a 7, 8, or a 9. I would go ahead and give this horse potentially a 4.5. He has gained quite a bit of weight, so that when he came into this farm, they made some of those management decisions that we talked about in the introduction. And they decided that his body condition score was not ideal. He was too low. And with some of those nutrition changes, he has moved up. And I would say now he's probably about a 4.5, okay? Now we're going to have a little bonus. We're going to look at a yearling filly. This is an Arabian yearling filly. We're going to look at the 6 spots on her and assign a body condition score. Since she's a baby, she's going to wiggle around a little bit, so you're going to have to use your eyes. All right, again, we're going to start at the neck. The first spot that we're looking at here is the crest. The crest here on this horse is very firm, not spongy, and doesn't wiggle, okay? Moving back, we're going to look at withers. You'll notice here the withers are not very sharp, not very prominent, but remember, that's a common trait for an Arabian. So we're going to continue on. Go down behind the shoulder, behind the elbow here. If you can see it all, that is just hair. There's no extra fat cover that's spongy behind that elbow. All right, we'll follow back to see how much fat cover we think we have over the ribs here. This is similar to that gelding, the quarter horse gelding that we just looked at. I can easily feel her ribs, not a whole lot of work, but there's a certain amount of smooth fat cover over those ribs. Okay, the next spot, along the spine, along the back here, I don't have a crease, it's nice and flat. So far, I don't see a lot of fat cover on this horse. Overall, it's not a very angular looking horse, meaning I'm not seeing big bones protruding from it. We're looking like an ideal body condition score. The last spot that we haven't looked at yet is her tail head, and she's being such a good girl. Not real spongy, not a lot of fat cover over her tail head, but it's nice and smooth. The vertebrae here are not protruding. Okay, so we'll take all 6 of those points into consideration, and I would say that this young filly here has an ideal body condition score of a 5.